Yes, I can hear you.
Hello.
Hello, the Riddler.
Ah, right. It
I can
worked. It
hear you.
worked. That's good. That's good.
Is
Yeah, yeah,
everybody
that's good. That's good.
okay? So you sound
I
like you're
couldn't I
uh,
couldn't find you, but
you sound maybe
say
like
again?
you're slightly so you sound like you're slightly Germanic or something, or am I
The
mistaken?
left tend to defend
Yeah,
Muslims
yeah, yeah.
because there is a sort
You're
of
close.
essentialism
Wow.
in a
Yeah,
lot of
technically, I
Americans'
guess.
mind after September 11th
Where
that
you
all
from
Right.
again?
Muslims are
You?
like that.
I'm from lots of
So
places.
there is pushback
I'm,
against the
you know,
bigotry that's
obviously
fostered
I
in
speak like this
America.
because I'm partly American, but I I was born in Switzerland. I've lived in Switzerland a lot. I'm in New Zealand right now. I've lived in Italy. So there. Yeah. Um,
All right, all right. Fair enough. Fair enough.
okay. I don't know. Do you wanna like talk about yourself? I don't know. You're
No,
the one
I don't want
calling
to talk
here.
about myself.
You're
No, no, I think you ended your whole thing by saying
He
that you're
stated on
morally
Dr. Joe
correct, right?
Mama he
Always.
was
So I
a
was wondering
yeah,
about that
Islamophobe.
because I need a guru in my life, you know?
yeah.
And you might be it. If you're the guy
Oh,
always being correct,
yeah,
could be you.
yeah. But do you want a guru in your life? Is this what you're saying, or are you saying that ironically? You there?
Um,
Oh yeah.
well, yeah, yeah, I'm old. I'm not that fast.
Oh yeah.
Um,
You don't sound very old,
everybody,
but oh,
yeah, no, I'm just, you know how it goes these days, right? Like
mm,
age is, how do you say that?
what?
Is it's different than it used to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. I
Yeah.
know.
So I
It's
think everybody could use a guru in their life. So
yeah, yeah,
you could
sure,
be mine if you can explain to me how
sure.
you're always the morally correct one because I'm really interested in that.
Well, that's basically my belief is based on the fact that um I think there are some obvious truths, like it is possible, in fact, to determine whether that some things are like, some ideologies are superior to others, that some ideas are more true than others. I mean, the whole principle of science is based on the idea that there is a truth out there and that we can say that this is true and this is false. That's what it's based on. And so what I'm thinking is that also when it comes to things like policies, which means like politics and thus morality, well, you can also um, consider that there are absolute truths, and the way I can to do this is to go from you have to have this first, you have to understand this like this first axiom. So it's this first principle that is like a fundamental principle, and that principle is the utilitarian principle. It's the idea that basically the basis of morality, the basis that what makes any action good is the maximization of well-being or the minimization of suffering. And so what I'm saying is that then we can basically consider whether a certain policy would tend to do that or not. And if it does, then it's a good policy,
I'm
and if
sorry
it
to
doesn't, it's a
interrupt
bad
you, but is
policy.
that
Sure.
your that is what you
What
believe in, or that is your yeah,
I'm
your
saying that
belief
this
system, right?
that is my belief system, and to me, it's the obviously, but it's sort of an intuitively rational belief. It's the belief of utilitarianism. Nothing else makes any sense. Um, and this is what I'm saying. I'm stating this. This is the axiomatic principle. You have to accept it. Then all my other statements can be derived from this fundamental principle. But this is the fundamental one. So if you can't recognize that, then there's no way I can prove that. Like you just have to. That's what an axiom is called. It's like a thing that you have to accept, and you can't prove it based on something else. I hope that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But then again, you still need to prove. I think you started your argument by saying
Mhm.
that we embrace science, right? Because
Mhm.
it's all about absolute truth. Well,
Mhm.
I don't really agree with that because obviously that's not what science is saying, right? Science can always disprove whatever has been proven before, right? So
Uh-huh.
I don't think science is saying there
No.
is an absolute
No,
out
it
there,
is.
right?
It is.
Because
No, no, science does say. If science sometimes, if it changes, it says we thought the absolute truth was like this,
no,
but now we recognize we're wrong, and now we're saying the absolute truth is probably like this. It recognizes that there is,
exactly, exactly. You're using the
but
word probably, right? Because
yeah, but
as
the
you
point
know,
is that there
everything you
is.
can quantify is always within a certain bandwidth. So
Yeah,
nobody's saying
yeah.
this is 100% how it is, right?
No, yeah,
But
yeah,
there's
yeah,
no
yeah, sure,
absolute. Let's
sure.
establish that first, okay?
No,
Okay.
that's no,
So,
no. It's not that there is no absolute. Is that we don't know the
oh, okay,
absolute.
yeah, yeah. Maybe,
It's
maybe,
different.
maybe it. Okay, maybe it's out there, but we
Yeah,
have to establish we'll
yeah,
never get there, right?
yeah,
That
yeah,
that's part of it.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But we can get
Okay,
close to
that
it.
makes
But we
sense.
can progress towards it. We can get better. I mean, the idea
But
of
we don't know
science
that.
is
If we don't know what it is, we
progressing.
don't know whether we're close, right? That's
Yeah.
we know if we can progress, but we don't know whether we're actually close.
Well, we know that we're closer than before. I mean, we've eliminated other false. We can know that other possibilities are false, and so we exclude the false possibilities. And so by doing so, we already know that we're getting closer.
But there might be infinite possibilities. So how do you exclude infinite possibilities stating you're closer, right? That doesn't mathematically make
Well,
sense.
because when it comes to, lots of, like things, scientific discoveries that have been made, we know they're essentially true. It's just that there might be, they might fit in an extra framework, which might make them only true in certain conditions. I mean, it's sort of like Newtonian physics, right? Which initially was thought to be always true, and then with like Einstein came along and realized that it's only true, at in sort of normal conditions, but sometimes in other strange conditions, it's not so true anymore. Um, but the point is that it's not like
Sure, sure, yeah,
it's
yeah,
false.
sure, we can say that about that theory, but
Hmm.
this is something we can definitely quantify, right? But if
Uh-huh.
you're playing on the field of morality,
Uh-huh.
it's
Yeah,
it,
that's
it
that's
gets a little
harder.
bit tricky, right?
Yeah,
Because
it's
you have
harder.
more of like you could probably say you have infinite, opinions or possibilities on a moral issue.
Yeah,
So
but
it's
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 quite
much
easy.
yeah much more complicated to know whether we're actually moving closer or further away from it,
I don't think
right?
it's
How do
all
you
that
establish that?
complicated. Well, like I said, you establish it based on the utilitarian principle. You see, if people are have more well-being overall, if they have less suffering overall, then you know that you're heading towards that. And I think there's some policies that obviously will lead to greater well-being, like something like torture that obviously causes suffering. So obviously, not having torture is, in and of itself, is obviously going to uh, foster more well-being. Of course, then you could argue torture then prevents crime, and so it prevents it sort of secondarily prevents suffering from crime, because people are afraid to commit crime because they might get tortured. So you could make that kind of an argument, but just in and of itself, you could say that, well, torture obviously causes suffering, so that brings us away from our goal.
Yeah, so we
Yeah.
we can sort of say those are obviously things that we would all
Hmm.
agree on, and
Hmm. But
they're not absolutes, but
not
they're
everyone agrees on. Not everyone agrees that
yeah,
torture is
maybe
bad.
maybe not everyone, but
Mhm.
vast majority would agree on that, which is perfectly fine.
Well, I don't
Uh,
even agree that the
but
vast majority agrees on that, actually. I think probably, like you said, lots of developing countries, they have different moralities, and I
oh,
would say,
right,
and I
yeah, yeah,
think,
yeah. Well, yeah, but in specific cases, I mean, yeah. Well, if you want to talk about torture, we can do that. But the thing is, I don't know if
mhm,
you want to do that to your stream. But yeah, we can talk about that
I,
because
I
I
can,
wouldn't I wouldn't I would necessarily take the stance that that should be because every that every country in the world does torture, right? You
yeah.
should be
I
aware
mean,
of that.
well, in some
Okay.
form or another, I mean, in most countries, it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
really legal, but they're presumably, indirectly going to be like, maybe selling weapons to a country that does or something like that. Um, in that sense, yes. Or I don't know, in a more limited sense, you could just say like when the police, arrest somebody and they're slightly rough or something, or then in prison, just being in prison, you could say it's kind of a bit of a torture, but that's pretty different. Like mo most like quote Western countries, I mean, like not all, but you could say that, yeah, again, maybe by collaborating with the United States, then you're responsible for Guantanamo or something, so then all Western countries are also doing torture. You could argue that way, but the point is that by and large, it's still frowned upon in many places. But what I want to bring up is that the idea that religion, well, and it's actually supported, especially in Christianity and Islam, just immense, actually infinite torture is supported in Christianity and Islam, and that's why I think those religions are really so horrible, in the form of hell, right? So that is infinite torture. So in fact, you've got about half the world population which actually worships torture, and worships far more torture than like you know even anything you could do on Earth.
Yeah,
So
of course.
yeah.
That as a tool for greater good, right? So that's
Mhm.
where you can start a discussion because that could also, end up being in favor of your position, saying, okay, if that ends up having a total net gain of
Mhm,
satisfaction, I think you
mhm.
put it right.
Yeah.
Or sorry, less suffering.
But
If
it's
that's the
both.
net
It's
gain of
both.
it,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So
yeah,
if it's both and it
yeah,
leads to that, then yeah, that makes sense, right? Because nobody is doing torture to somebody that died, as far as we know, right?
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
if you're saying in your religion you should be punished after you die, yeah, I
Mhm.
mean that could be a valid position. Who
But
knows?
no, it's not because it's
Because
infinite torture. Like you'd have, if it was a deterrent, you could justify torture by saying that you'd have less suffering because people are afraid to do bad things, right? But you'd only need like 1 day in hell to already deter people from doing bad things. You don't need to make it eternity. So the point is that because it's eternity, then it completely violates the principle of utilitarianism because that means there's
yeah,
infinite.
but you're looking at it from the individual perspective. Because if the outcome is that the majority of people will make decisions which will not put them in hell, then the net outcome of that would be that the majority of people will make a decision, and that will not end in eternal suffering,
Yeah,
right?
but yeah,
So
but that's
so
still
if
that's
if
still
if the
wrong.
religion,
You'll
well,
still
if
you'll
the
still have
religion's
more.
goal is to the religion's goal is not to get people in hell, right? The goal is to get less people in hell.
Yeah,
So
but at the
that's the
same
sort of the
time,
same goal as you just stated.
yeah, except that at the same time they no, it's the point is that the religion at the same time they create this hell. So their goal is actually to have a hell and to punish people there forever in it. So they do have a goal of at the same time of torturing people. And
Sure,
so
sure, but
that they're
that's how you get the results, right? Because you're in your philosophy, the results
yeah.
is what counts, right?
Yeah,
So the
but
net
my
gain,
point
the net result is what counts.
Yeah, but the net result, the point is that you'd have a much far more favorable net result if you just sent everyone to heaven, because in any case, the suffering that you experience in one brief lifetime is going to be infinitely small compared to an infinity of suffering. So even if you send just one person to hell, that you've already lost. You've already done much worse than sending everyone to hell, than everyone to heaven.
Yeah, but
Like,
it's a continuum, right? In that other philosophy, it's
mhm.
probably a continuum, right? So
It's
there
not.
you're
No,
talking
it's
about one
not.
life or
It's not a continuum because, like I said, infinity, people don't understand that infinity, like, I don't, infinity is not even possible. This is something that many people don't even understand. But infinity is obviously not possible because anything that's finite is infinitely small compared to infinity, so it just even couldn't exist. And so infinity is not really a true thing, but just supposing that it was, then everything else is infinitely small, which means that any wrongdoing that you do on Earth is also infinitely small, and any suffering experienced in your life is also infinitely small compared to suffering in the afterlife, which means that if you send even any single person to hell for infinity, then that is
yeah,
already
but
infinitely times
again, you're
more than
using
any
you're
suffering.
using yeah, but you're using a different scale because you're using your own scale of time
No, I'm
to
using
another
infinity.
philosophy which has a different scale,
No,
right?
because
So a
it uses
religious
infinity.
scale is very different from your scale,
Well, no, because it
right?
uses
Because in a
infinity.
religious viewpoint, then if you're talking about infinity,
Hmm.
it's a very different subject,
Hmm.
right? Because if you read infinity
Hmm.
in a religious text or a
Hmm.
religious context,
Hmm.
you're thinking about time, right?
Hmm.
That's a whole different thing. So
Well,
that's obviously different from religion to religion, but that's not really comparable in the same
it's
philosophy, right?
I know that they sort of have this idea that's something different from time, but really it's again it's just a sort of waffling around to sort of refer to just again to not be sort of to sort of be vague, I think. But no, it has to be time. It is in this case, it's eternity, and it is about time, and it is about eternal time, and so
For
and
instance, in the Christianity
hmm
or in Christianity,
hmm
obviously in that statement, there is no time, so you have
hmm
nothing to scale that against, right? You're
hmm
in a continuum. Uh,
well
so that's
there is time. I mean, there is acknowledgement of time, and there's sort of an idea of an eternal afterlife, and it is essentially meant to be in time, right? I mean, I know they say it's sort of different,
that's what
but
you think, right? But that's not what people that hang on to the religion believe or think
I
or
think it is what they believe.
act
I
on.
think they tell themselves that it's a different kind of time, but I don't see how it could be. It's still going to be time. It can't be. What else can it be? If it has to be time. There's like how can it be a different time? It's still going to be time. Um, you know.
That's
So
yeah. I don't know. That's the difficulty is to certain ideas or
Mhm.
concepts are very hard to
Mhm.
describe in like a worldly manner, right? Or
Mhm.
if you talk about things that are beyond life
Mhm.
in general, right? That's
Mhm.
something that's very hard to describe because you have only worldly concept or ideas to
Yeah, but
describe
the
it.
point is that why are you
So
imagining? How
how
do
are
you
you
have?
gonna describe something with only the tools that you don't have yet, right?
Yeah,
So
but the point is
that's
that
the
how
difficulty.
how can you even know about this if it's about something that you are unable to understand? Like why how are you even able to believe about this stuff if it's not even something that you can comprehend? You're basically all you're saying is that there's something afterwards that is somehow different. But even then there's still going to be time. Like there can't not be time. It's just maybe will feel different to you, but in fact it still will end up being time. And again, this is where the sort of again these sort of kind of
Yeah, but
wiggle
yeah,
they
okay,
weasel
but
their way out
maybe
of this idea of
no, not
time.
really,
It's
because you know how for example, the Bible says how
hmm
I think there's a line that says like something like one day is like 1,000 and 1,000 is like one, right? You can also
yeah, I
say,
know.
okay, so time is relative, which is
Yeah.
something that we know already, right? So
Yeah,
time is
sure.
relative. So
Of
when you're
course.
talking about time or infinity, all these things are relative to each other, at least in your, for example, in your belief system or anyone else's belief system, that's also true, right? So time in itself is not really a concept you can talk about
Well,
or
I
even
think it is.
compare.
I mean,
Right? So
no,
if you're
it
talking
is
about
it is something
internal
you can.
suffering, we don't know what that means.
I
No
think we
one is
do.
saying they
I
do.
think I think
No,
I
no,
think
we
we
don't.
do. But I think most people who believe in eternal suffering just think it's going to be time and that's it. I don't think like literally the like what else could it be? Like it's just time. Like I don't understand. Yeah, it's sure it's psychological time, but it's still psychological time is still just an experience of things changing. So there has to be time. And literally consciousness I think requires time. It literally requires to be there are changes in perception. Like consciousness basically depends on like changes of perception for to to exist. So you'd still have like eternal changes of perception, and so it doesn't even matter because like eternity in any case isn't an amount, so it would just be it would just be eternal. It doesn't matter if time is like slower or faster or whatever. It'd still be an infinite amount, which of course I think is absurd again because then they're not it's not actual infinity, it's not actual eternity. Um, but yeah, yeah. Um, that's I don't know if you have any other sort of things you wanted to bring up at this point. I don't know.
Oh, I
I'm
was just because I was just well, I wouldn't say triggered, but I was just wondering because you know the this is where you base your position on, right?
yeah, yeah,
We need to reduce, or you want to reduce the suffering and
yeah,
maximize the satisfaction, right? I think that
yeah,
was it.
yeah, yeah.
And
Howdy,
why
virus.
should that be the high and why should that be the highest goal?
Well, because it's self-evident. That's the axiomatic principle. I can't say why. It should be obvious to you. If it's not obvious to you, there's nothing more I can say to justify
Yeah,
it because that's
but
the
that's a
axiomatic
very weak
principle.
position, right? Because
No,
you can't really
there's always an
explain to
axiom.
me
There's always an axiom.
why.
It should be
Yeah, yeah,
self-evident.
but that
It's like
doesn't
God.
prove why your axiom is better than someone else's, right? Which is
Axioms
why
aren't possible to
in the
prove.
beginning you said your
Axioms
morality is
axioms aren't
always
possible to prove.
correct.
Yeah, it is because it is obvious. If you can't understand it, I can't explain it to you. But it's just self-obvious.
Oh, you
Um,
keep saying it's an axiom. We haven't actually established that, right? Because you're
no,
making
you
a lot of
can't. You
statements,
can't.
but
You can't
you're
establish
not really.
an axiom
No, again, we don't know
is
whether it
impossible.
even is one. Okay, so
No, but like in math, an axiom you
that's
don't know
something.
if there is one. You just accept it.
Yeah, but
People
again,
say
it's not
these are the
math.
axioms.
It's not math.
No, but it's the same idea. We don't know if there is an axiom. It's just a mathematician who says this is the axiom, and then you just have to accept it. It's this is the same this is the same thing. There's no way of establishing that there is an axiom. In math, that's not how it works. It's like rather a mathematician says this is the
Yes, but
axioms, and you have to
again,
believe
it's
me.
not math.
It doesn't
It's
matter.
not
It's the
math.
same. Works the same. Works the same. It's like
Yeah, but
you've got
that's
to.
not how you.
It
Yeah,
is.
but that's not really how
That's
you
how
can
axioms.
argue anything.
That's how axioms
If you
work.
say, okay, this is yeah, but
This
again,
is why I
we
can't
haven't
argue.
established that it is
I
one.
I can't argue if
So
you can't
so you
see.
have you have a position. You have a position, and you say I can't clarify why I have this
I can
position
clarify everything else.
because
I can clarify everything that stems from this position.
yeah, but
I
this is
I can
pretty
all
important, right? If you say we need to reduce or those 2 points that are
if you
connected with that, if
again,
you
it's
can't
so
say
obvious.
why that's the highest thing we should
Don't you
go
see?
after, then
don't
we
you
can't
see how that is
we can't really.
incredibly obvious that suffering is bad and like how literally I mean I can give you examples. I can give you an example like how
Maybe suffering is part of life, and you learn something from that. For
yes, of course.
example,
Yeah,
right?
but then that will bring you greater well-being in the future. So it's still because you get greater well-being in the future. This is like how else could there what else could be the final goal? There can be no other explanation. Like how what are you going to base yourself on to say if something is bad other than suffering? You can't.
Yeah, but
There's
okay,
no other
so
way.
the one thing that seems to be very important for
Mhm.
you is like the individual position, because you keep talking about, if for you, for example, the suffering should be very very small, but maybe there's a different sum in that, right? So maybe it's not about you or how you feel. Maybe it's about what society does, or maybe it's all about how we leave the planet. I don't know, but
Yeah.
that's not something we can discuss because your position doesn't allow that, right?
What
So
do you
that
mean? No,
doesn't
it does.
that makes your position very weak.
No, it doesn't.
Maybe the
It's
end
not.
goal isn't your suffering or your satisfaction. Maybe the end goal is leaving the planet as a whole. I don't know, but
No, but the only
that
reason
your
for that would be
philosophy doesn't allow
because you
that.
can enjoy it. It
You
does allow
understand?
it. It does allow it. It does allow it. The
No, no,
point
no,
is
no.
that if you leave the planet,
No. How?
if you leave the well-being, no, because leaving the well-being of the planet well, like caring about the well-being of the planet, is because it allows to bring everyone greater well-being, through having a nice environment, through having,
No,
like
planet
the
isn't a
environment
human.
and
Planet isn't a
what?
human, so that's not even connected to whether there's humans on it or not.
Oh yeah,
That's
no, but in and of
completely.
yeah, no, but in and of itself, the planet does not have value. Again, if there's nobody to perceive it,
That's
then
who.
it's as if it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist if you don't perceive it. Like literally, things don't
Okay.
exist without consciousness.
Okay,
Like literally.
so so let's bring something else then. Maybe
Hmm.
there are other forms of life in the universe, and they look
Hmm.
at the planet and they
Yeah,
care about the planet, and thus
yeah,
the planet has value, right?
yeah,
How does that work into your philosophy about
yeah.
how you feel about you as an individual, about your satisfaction?
No, it's
That
not my
doesn't.
satisfaction. It's
We need
everybody's
to talk
satisfaction.
about why that is the most
Everybody's
important thing.
everybody's
Do you
satisfaction,
understand? Like,
well-being, everybody's well-being. That's to say, not mine specifically. It's everybody's overall. Every action should maximize the collective well-being, minimize the collective suffering. It should be done so in a manner that is the most fair possible, and that should work more on eliminating the worst suffering rather than creating more well-being. So the most important thing is to ensure that we eliminate the most horrible suffering. Just like in society, I think what matters the most is to take care of those who are the poorest. So that's an example of that. Um, that like literally, this is just how it works. Like if you don't,
yeah, yeah,
how
I
else
get
could you?
I
Yeah.
get I get how you think, but
Hmm.
that's it's not really it's a very weak starting point. Do you know
No,
what I
it's not
mean?
very weak.
Because
Like literally, there's like
it's very important
okay, but
to have
this is
to
religious
base your
people
argument
always
on that,
say
right?
that it's weak, but then their thing just is has nothing at all. Like this
I'm
makes
not
like
religious, by the way, just so
okay,
you know.
okay, sure. But the point is that like religious people say that and they say oh it's weak and then they say you've got to have like a greater purpose or something. And like there's always going to be something axiomatic. There's always going to be an irreducible principle that you just cannot derive from something else. It's like in Newtonian, there's F equals m times a, force equals mass times acceleration. That is the axiom, and then the only way we prove it is just through examples. You just see that this is how it works, and but there's no way of like deriving it from something more fundamental. This F equals m times a is a fundamental axiom, and like yeah, this is how it works. Um, so like there's always going to be an
Yeah, but
axiom, no matter
you
what.
do acknowledge that you're yeah, but you
It's
do
not.
acknowledge that that it isn't one perfect, and two, it can collide with others, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
that
Of
way,
course, of course. Like in any case, yeah, we
so
don't know
you then
exactly.
also agree that okay, so you would agree that the morality you base you get from your axiom can then also be very incorrect. Yes.
I wouldn't. No, it wouldn't be very incorrect. It's just that it's hard to like say exactly. I mean, there are different way. I mean, there's sort of subtlety. So the principle obviously should be respected, but then there's sort of some subtlety. There's some nuance. For instance, if we really wanted to eliminate all eliminate most all suffering as much as possible, then we should simply, if we could, we just destroy the whole universe. That way, nobody would exist anymore, and so there would be no suffering. So in a way, that could be a justification. But you could then say, well, maybe it's still worthwhile to have the suffering that there is, so that we can also experience lots of well-being. So that is where there's room for discussion. Definitely, there's room for discussion of that sort. I'll agree with that. But where there isn't room for
Yeah, yeah.
discussion is like a completely different framework. We're saying that morality is like, for instance, about always doing what is the most tiring, or always doing for anyone, like, or I don't know, always, when it comes to always going eastwards and never going westwards. It's like that doesn't make sense in a moral system. What makes sense is suffering. It's not like there's no other thing that makes sense, if you see if you see what I mean. Um, like how
Yeah, no,
else?
I understand. I understand from the starting point that you choose that everything you
Yeah, but
say after
what?
that
No,
makes
but what?
makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense,
and
right?
what else would
Obviously.
anyone choose? What else would anyone choose? Like if you don't choose suffering,
Well,
what
it's
is
not like
somebody gonna choose? What is somebody
well, it's not
else
like
gonna choose?
I have thought about that deeply,
Mm.
or I'm in favor of
But maybe you should,
a
because
given theory,
if you do
because
think about
this
it,
isn't
yeah.
even your position. This isn't even your position, right? This is
What?
something that somebody else wrote down as their position, right? So
Okay,
that's
well,
not
it's all,
very
yeah.
interesting because you just copy paste someone else's position.
Yeah, no, but
Like
I
that's
came.
not really.
No, but I adhere to it independently. It's not because somebody else like wrote about it. Like I've come up with it in my by myself. Okay, somebody else has also said it, but I'm saying this independently. It's not just a copy pasting. Um, it's independently. This is obvious. There are other people that have said other things, and I don't support that. I support this one, this idea, because it's obviously the right principle. And like this is it's obvious. And again, you should like the the only other the only other way that people see it is basically like it's either like religion or moral relativism. Basically what you got, most people's morality is either going to be that. So if it's religion, then it's just about God, so then it's just something is good because God said so. But then that is obviously absurd, because then like how can you even determine whether your god is good? And in fact, it's obvious that the god is not good, because the god literally sends, from my perspective, it's obvious because literally the god causes eternal suffering, right? So obviously that is, and that, again, this is axiomatic, it's self-evident. And this is why I just cannot agree even at all with people who believe in god in such a manner, because they literally don't
Yeah, but
have the same
there
fundamental
is a
principle of
billion
ethics.
there's a billion religious yeah, okay, but there's a billion religions out there,
Yeah,
and you could say about a lot of them that obviously their religion tries to do the same, right?
yeah,
Or they try
yeah.
to limit the suffering in itself. So maybe
But
the
superficially
method
they do.
is
Superficially they do, but at the same time they're okay
yeah,
with
but
sending
if
people to
that
hell.
works, if that's a result, if that leads to a better result,
Yeah,
because
but still.
if you think about it, like
Mhm,
in a way, like what I find interesting is that
mhm,
we in our heads, right, we sort of
mhm,
measure where we are now with suffering, right? You
mhm,
probably look at the world, right, as you were
mhm,
doing just now, and
mhm,
you look at it and you're thinking about, okay, which
mhm.
countries have, I don't know, LGBTQ
Yeah, yeah,
rights, and if they do, then that I don't know, decreases suffering or whatever.
yeah, yeah.
But in another realities, which you're probably not too familiar with, you can talk
What?
about how people reflect on, I don't know, the 1950s, for
Mhm,
example,
mhm,
right? You can say a
yeah,
lot about eras in the past.
mhm,
So it's it's very problematic.
mhm.
It's very problematic. You see where I want to go?
Not really. No, I don't really see what
Because we
you're
haven't
referring
really,
to.
because if we go from your starting point, then
Mhm.
we have to measure that somehow, right?
Yeah.
And that in itself already becomes very tricky.
Well, yeah, of course it's,
But even in a way,
but
yeah, but even in a way that you're doing it, then
mhm,
yeah, I don't even know. Like I would say, like if we have to
mhm,
sum things up, like probably a few decades ago,
yeah.
it was probably much more. We would be much more closer to whatever your end goal would be, right? Even though the things that are happening are probably, or it looks like you're embracing those developments like
Mhm.
it's progress, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Does that make sense? Or
Well, yeah, I think any I support any policy that maximizes well-being of people. So I think that we've made progress
you're
overall.
also stating that, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
but you also stated that the majority of people are idiots,
yeah, and
right? So
they're
you
hurting
can
themselves. Yeah.
depend on idiots to have more freedom, and if more idiot people have more freedom, there's going to be less suffering somehow, right? How does that make sense?
Well, because they have to have freedom individually in the way to lead their lives. They can't have obviously the freedom to actually be idiots and like to vote according to their idiotic beliefs. I mean, there has to be a limit obviously there's a limit to freedom because actually more freedom just in terms of laws will lead to loss of freedom because then people will actually vote for oppressive laws that will then limit everyone's freedom. So obviously there's a balance to be found, but there can still be a maximization of freedom. But the maximization of freedom doesn't mean just a free for all without any laws. There have to be laws, and the laws that people can't even vote out of existence. So this is that's the concept of a livable society. It rests on that, in fact. Like you're not. It's just
Yeah, but
yeah.
I'm sort of struggling how that ties in with the whole
Hmm.
uh, suffering, right? Because
Yeah.
I think you're using a very broad definition, right? I think you're thinking that if somebody is by law not allowed
Hmm.
to marry same-sex individual,
Yeah.
then somehow suffering
Yeah.
or net suffering is worse,
Yeah. There.
right?
Yeah.
Even though there is so much you can take from, like I said, for example, the 50s,
Hmm.
if how society was built and how much
Yeah.
gain that has for society. If you
Hmm.
think about the fact that I don't know. I'm just going. I'm not. Obviously, this is not. But I'm
Hmm.
just speaking in general terms. If,
Hmm.
for example, I'm basing that on your, belief
Hmm.
system, right?
Hmm.
So if you look at how a lot of gay men, for example,
Hmm.
were married with a woman and have children,
Hmm. Yeah.
that maximizes could maximize a lot of well-being, right? Whereas in this society, that
I
doesn't
don't.
really happen
Well,
anymore,
I don't think so, because
right?
obviously,
So
no, it doesn't maximize well-being because they're not going to be happy. They're going to be in an unhappy marriage. That's not
Well,
nice.
we're
That's
talking about if the net, if yeah, but we're talking about if the net, maybe
no,
they marry with a woman, and on the side,
yeah, but then they still, they
they
still
do what they
feel
want to do,
no, yeah, okay,
whatever,
okay, but they still no, it's still not going to be as good. I mean, obviously, if they're gay, then they should be with gay, like they should be with a gay spouse, obviously.
But
Like,
how do you know? How do you know? What if they get
well, the
five
point.
kids and all those five kids become very happy? What's the end result?
So so you're talking about yes, I know what you're talking about here, and that's a valid sort of example here. Yeah, you're going to have more people overall. So then the question is, do we want to maximize absolute amounts of well-being? And I would say that that is the least important goals. I think what's more important is to maximize relative well-being and to minimize the absolute amount of suffering. I don't support so much the idea of just creating more people so that we have more just absolute amounts of well-being because we have more absolute amounts of people. I don't really support that notion. Um, but I'm not exactly
But,
opposed to it either. But
you
should
have to deviate. You have to deviate from from your original position
not
to do
really,
so, right?
not
Because
really, because
obviously the mathematics of it are there,
no,
right?
no,
So
because like I said,
then
the
all of a
most
sudden you go back to the individual, and then you say, oh no,
no,
wait, it's
no, no,
about
no,
how everybody on
no, because
on
no,
itself
like I said,
feels.
because it's more about minimizing suffering, especially, and maximizing the relative well-being. So not necessarily just creating more people so that there's more absolute amounts of well-being. It's not so much in that sense. It's about making all people who already exist as happy as possible, or of the people who exist, those people should be happy. The fact that there are less people or more people, that doesn't really matter like, except
Yeah, but
it matters more for
that's
suffering.
yeah, but that doesn't make sense. That doesn't
No,
make
it does
sense
make sense. It
because
does
people
make
that
sense. That's
exist die.
utilitarianism.
No. People that exist die, so there's no continuum there, right? So
So
then how do you measure that over time? That's difficult because in 100 years we're gone.
yeah.
Well, we're
So
probably
so
both gone
yeah, but
in a hundred
yeah,
years.
but
So
the point is that all people who are existent, they should be able to experience well-being. They should be able to experience, you know, happiness or whatever, and to not
so
suffer
you're saying you measure it by at any given point, like
at
the
all
most
given points.
satisfied
Not any.
versus
At all points.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I wasn't finished yet.
Okay, yeah,
At
go
any
ahead.
given point, if you would measure the least satisfied versus the most satisfied
Yeah,
person, right? So that's
yeah,
your relative
yeah,
satisfaction.
yeah.
That is your position, right?
No, 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 no,
That's what
that
we
not
should be
relative in
aiming
that
for. That
sense.
should be
Not relative in that sense. I meant in the
okay.
terms of
Relative to what?
I meant like
Because
the
we
level,
can't compare it to others
the
because they
average.
haven't born yet.
I mean, no, I mean what I meant by that is that like the average amount of like if you like could quantify well-being and then you added up the well-being of everyone and then divided by the number of people, you want to maximize that amount. The you know the well-being per capita as opposed to the total, right? You see the what I mean by that? There should be the most amount of well-being per person. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but okay, but then again, average it doesn't make any sense because there could be a
Why?
person in the world being extremely happy, and the
Yeah.
other 8 billion could not be happy, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, 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 sure.
if
So
that one
also, so
person
not
gets
just that.
happier and
Yeah,
happier, then the average goes up.
yeah,
So it
of
doesn't make
course.
sense
No, of course, of
in
course.
your worldview.
No, no, because it takes that
Okay,
into
so
account.
how do you
No, because it's just that you take that into account and you take the fact that there should be fairness. So everybody should be sort of, we should try to get everybody sort of at the same level. And we should especially ensure that nobody is really unhappy. Like we should especially focus on
but
the
if
bottom,
everybody is
on the
sort of at
most.
the same level,
Hmm.
then mathematically you can't really advance that fast. Or you can probably, if everybody
Yeah,
is equal, you won't advance.
well, you can
So
advance,
then
but
you can't
it's
really
just more
compare
slow.
that, and there's no
Individual.
progression.
No,
There's no
there is
progression
progression.
then.
There just isn't any fast progression. It's slower progression. Yeah, it's slower progression. That's how
And
it should be.
you want less suffering, but you want slow
Yeah,
progression. Is that it?
yeah, because
And at
it's
the
low.
same
It's
time,
less.
you
It's the
say
least
we
suffering
can't.
overall. Yeah, that's how it works. I mean,
Yeah, but
it
yeah,
does make.
but in the same philosophy, you say, okay, a person you can't really uh, keep calculating over people that haven't been born yet. So in the lifespan of somebody, there's no significant change because we're going very slow. If that would be the case, right? If we're all close to that average, we're going very slow. But we can't really take into
It doesn't
account
actually
the
necessarily
new
go very
happiness
slow.
level of people that are alive. So basically, we're not making any significant level of progression, right? That's that's basically what you're
No,
saying mathematically.
no, we can make progression because as the global GDP per capita increases, people will be richer overall, and so there's overall progression. Or as laws become, more tolerant and give more like freedom
I'm
and
talking about
less
the real
oppression
world.
to
I'm talking
people.
about your position. I'm not talking about the real world.
Oh, but in my position, that's how
I'm
it
talking
works.
about
Yeah,
yeah,
my
but I'm talking
position,
about how do we measure that?
oh, oh, okay. Well, if you're talking about how do you measure that, of course, it's like impossible to actually quantify because there's no like actual measuring device. But you can,
There we
you can have
go. There we go.
no, you can have like questionnaires. You can like, have surveys of people. You ask people, and you can just also, presume. You can presume that
Yeah,
people who have
I'm
more money
familiar
are
with the
also,
happiness index.
yeah,
I'm familiar with that,
and
but
you can presume.
that's not really yeah. Let's not really assume we can take that into account as a serious possibility, right?
Well, we should no, I think we can. I think we absolutely. Why not? You're just saying that, but why not? And we can also presume that
I would
people are going
argue
to be
that
happier with
you yeah,
more
but
wealth. It
you
should be kind of
on that
obvious.
happiness in yeah, but on that happiness index, wealth plays such an important role, and that seems
Well,
very
that's external happiness.
weird.
That then it's up to you to
Yeah,
find
but that's
internal
if you look
happiness.
at
How
yeah, but
how else? Then
exactly.
it's up
But
to you.
look at
Yeah,
the index. Look at the
yeah,
index. Like
yeah,
wealth is pretty much the biggest decider there.
yeah.
So then you're basically your whole philosophy is based on wealth. That's pretty. If
Well,
you're saying
because
that's where
yeah,
you how you
but we
measure it,
know
then that's it.
no, because we also know studies have been where they just ask people's like satisfaction with their life and stuff, and then they correlate it to wealth, and they see that like basically there's
Sure,
a correlation.
sure.
There is a
But more
correlation.
wealth doesn't mean less suffering or more
No, no.
satisfaction either. I
Overall
think
it
we
does.
know that
Overall
already.
it
So
does.
wealth
No,
has let's establish that wealth has nothing to do with that, and we
no, it
can't use
doesn't
the
have nothing to
happiness
do with it.
index.
It doesn't. No, we haven't established that at all. We have established, in fact, that there is a
Okay,
correlation.
we can. Well, let's establish it right now then. Why do you think? Why do you think it doesn't matter?
Why do I think it does matter? Look, a correlation.
For your position, so you're saying that if the
There is a
satisfaction
correlation.
is increased, is
Mhm.
there is a yeah, okay, correlation, but that doesn't really mean anything.
No, it
Like we
does.
can doesn't mean there's causation, okay?
No,
Sure, there's
no, it
correlation
does.
with weather. People that live around the Mediterranean, they're probably more happy because the weather is
Yeah,
better.
so that's
Okay,
yeah, but
great.
that's also presumably
Then what?
that's
Are
causation
we going to
probably
change
also.
the climate? Are we going to change the
No,
climate
because that
because
would be because
that
it would
seems to
create
be the
more unhappiness. It would create more unhappiness by disrupting all sorts of things by changing the climate elsewhere, and people can just move.
yeah, yeah. But with
People can
all of
just
these things, we can't really, those are just, as you say, those are just surveys. We can't really. That's not a quantification of anything.
yeah, but we can
Okay, let's
sort of
just.
yeah, but it should be obvious that we should want to create more wealth for people. Like I
Very
don't know.
disappointed, man. If that's your because I wanted to
Well,
finish or
okay,
by
okay,
saying
go
like
ahead. Go.
where I wanted to sort of where I was trying to go was that
Mhm.
if you would take, I think there's still, for example, tribes out there in the Amazon, right? And
Mhm.
you would, those guys aren't on the happiness scale, and that's the whole point, right?
Mhm.
Whereas
Yeah, they're
taking the happiness index, wealth is such a that's just the biggest driver. That's literally it, and
the point is that there's no because
that has
policies
nothing
can't.
to do with
Yeah, but policies can't determine
suffering
people's
or
well-being in other ways. When we talk about politics, is to mostly to determine about material things. So we can't like literally vote on making people happy directly. It's not possible. People's minds don't work like that. You can't just press a button and make people happy. So of course we have to just focus on uh on factors that can influence on
hold on,
happiness and
hold
not
on. No,
happiness
no, no,
itself.
no, 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 no.
Okay,
Hold
what?
on. No, this is a very wrong position, I think,
Okay, what?
because
So,
obviously a lot of things with policy are tied down to the budget you get to
mhm,
to get the policy on the ground. Of
mhm,
course, I agree with you there,
mhm.
but
Yeah.
the vast majority of things or policies we have
Mhm,
nowadays,
mhm,
if you look at the basic things that you have in laws,
mhm,
which once weren't policy, which are policy now, have
mhm,
nothing at all to do with money. Nothing at all. Like you talked about LGBTQ rights in
mhm.
the beginning. That has
Yeah,
nothing to do with money,
yeah.
but in your it can probably
It
increase
has
or
to do
decrease, whatever,
well, it has
right?
to go
So
with another
I don't think
principle
like wealth or money
with fairness.
or
It has to do with the principles
it
of
doesn't play a
fairness
role.
and
Trust
freedom
me.
with it's basically about fairness and freedom to maximize overall well-being in a fair fashion, through maximizing people's freedom, through maximizing people's autonomy to live as they wish, and which will then make them feel valued and again being able to do the choice of what they want. That it is kind of a value also in and of itself. So again, that's like my first principle. Of course, the utilitarian thing of maximizing well-being, and then of course you have fairness, so you should maximize that well-being in a fair fashion. But then fairness is also a value in and of itself for other things such as wealth. I also think there should be fairness in wealth, and then there should be like freedom also. So people that should also it's a value, especially because it maximizes well-being, but it's also a bit of an inherent value as well. Just because like I don't think that one should be allowed to prevent people from doing things if those things don't like negatively impact other people. You should be free to do what you want as long as it's just stuff that impacts you. And that's the principle of these LGBT things. Of course, it's like and it's about just letting people do what they want if it doesn't influence other people in a very obvious fashion, and also about creating a society that's more tolerant and that where people feel more accepted. So this
Sure,
is
sure.
this is
But
what I'm
none
saying.
of that has anything to do with any type of budget, right? You can
Yeah,
decide on
of
that as a
course,
society
of course.
tomorrow
Of
to
course,
okay,
but
so
that's
we've
important
established
too.
that, right?
That's important too, but it's not just budget. I mean, but that's budget's an important component, but that's also an important component. Yeah, yeah, uh, I
Yeah,
agree.
I would say it's probably if that's going to be your theory, then I would say that obviously the budget thing or the money or the GDP per capita, that's a very, very small amount, right? Because at if you believe that we are making progress, maybe we
Hmm.
are, maybe we're not. I don't know. I don't measure
I
that. But
well, I
if
think we
we
are.
are, right?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, but
convinced
you
that we
can't
are.
really quantify that or measure that, so
Well,
that's just
you
a
no, but
blank
like I said,
statement,
you
right?
can. You've got these surveys, and like literally, it's obvious that if you're like right now in a sort of in a properly built house and you've got a computer and stuff, it's better than if you're just living in a mud hut and you just eat like poor quality food and you're not having enough to eat. Like obviously, you're better off. So obviously, we should be aiming to increase
I
the
know you
material
use the
well-being of
word
people.
obviously, but it's not that obvious. You
Well,
I think you know that because because things like life expectancy, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Wealth, all of those things, we're
Mhm.
trying to quantify those in in happiness, and you try to quantify that into suffering or
Yeah.
satisfaction. But we
Yeah.
also know that if you look at these, I don't know, if you look at these excluded tribes in the Amazon,
Yeah.
we really get confronted by the way we measure these things, right?
Yeah, of course. Of course.
And
I
we
know.
and
I
then
know.
all of a sudden our theory is really very, or your theory is very vulnerable to the way you measure it, because then we realize that's probably not the way to quantify
Well,
that,
yeah, of course, because
right? Because living
there's also inner well-being, of course. But the point is that you still by having
oh no
more
no
much
I think you're missing a point. I think you're
so
missing a
what
point
point?
in your
Okay, what
theory,
point?
and that is
What point
that
am I missing according to you? Tell me.
you need money in your system
Mhm.
because people are jealous, right? So if your
No.
aim is to make everybody somewhat averagely or close to the middle point
Mhm.
of satisfaction, then if your neighbor has a nice house, you need to have a
Yeah.
nice house. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you're not close to that
Yeah,
average,
no, but
right? And to
it's not
buy the
about
house,
that.
you need money. So that's the
It's
flaw. That's a flaw in your philosophy, right? So if a human isn't jealous, you
mhm.
wouldn't have that problem, and you wouldn't make statements like you just did, saying, "Okay, wealth should be fairly distributed," or you said something about it
No,
should be
no, because
fair,
no, because
right?
you know, because fairness is an absolute value. An absolute value. It should be fairly distributed, just because it's
Yeah, but
also because it creates more
that's
well-being.
really not.
It
That's
creates
really
more
not
well-being
an
overall,
absolute.
and
No, not
no,
at
it
all.
is. It is.
Not at
Fairness
all.
is an
Not at all.
absolute ethical principle.
No.
How can you
And
say
I'll
no?
tell you why. Because
Why?
okay. So yeah, I know that's not something you're probably used to hearing, but every person in itself is unique. So in that
Yeah,
sense, maybe not
yeah,
chemistry wise, but skill wise, or
yeah,
network wise, or knowledge wise, they are.
yeah,
So it doesn't really make sense to say everybody is different,
yeah.
yet we should divide stuff fairly. That doesn't really make sense,
No, it
because we
does.
don't know how a skill. No, because we don't know how a skill, how that stacks up against dividing something. We don't know that because we can't measure that. So that's a flaw in the system, in your system, right? Which you can't really cope for. So you can't really fill that hole by saying, okay, maybe somebody that has a great skill that has no monetary
Mhm.
value.
Yeah.
You should somehow compare for that,
Yeah, the point is
right?
that's impossible. It's impossible to do that, I know, which is why what I advocate for in practice is simply to limit the amount of like inequalities in income and wealth. That's the best you can do because you can't really fairly like precisely fairly quantify these things. So the best you can do is just limit the unfairness. You
I'm very
can't
disappointed. I'm very disappointed. No,
what?
because you
What?
keep. I don't understand why you keep talking about money. Like the first thing I would come across is if you're
Okay.
talking about distributing things fairly, you would probably think about things like education, right?
Yeah, but
That would be something that would probably pops in mind first than having money or wealth,
yeah,
right?
but that's money.
Like
Like
that's
education is money.
or
It costs.
security. Think about
Yeah, but that
security.
costs.
Everybody should
That's a
have the
cost.
right to have a secure
Yeah.
environment, right?
Yeah.
That's much more important than having a certain level of wealth that should be
Yeah.
equal to your neighbor, right? But you start off by saying wealth, like that's again that's we just established with the
It's
happiness
not just
index, like
wealth. It's
that's
not
it's
just wealth. It's not just wealth, but
no again
an
wealth is
important
just
component.
insignificant to all of
No, it's
that,
not
to all of that.
insignificant. It's not insignificant. People like literally
It is.
people work to have more wealth, and if they do that, it's because they think it'll make them more happy. Like there's literally that is the whole driver of like
Again, we need to establish first that that is the case, which we haven't. We need to stack those things up against each other, which you don't, right? Your assumption is that whole happiness index thing, where you can sort of, you know, see how GDP per capita is the biggest factor there, which we
mhm.
don't even know how that stacks up against a person living in the Amazon who does nothing all day, who makes no money but has a great life. We don't know that,
But the thing is
right?
that by
And
and
we need to
large
know
they
how
don't
that stacks up
necessarily
against each
have
other to
such a
make
great
your
life.
theory a whole.
They don't have such a great
No,
life. If
I'm
they get
saying we
sick,
don't know that.
well,
I'm
we
saying we don't know that.
no, we knew
But
that.
you're making
I mean, there
statements
have
like
been.
you do.
We
In,
know
in
that
your in your
within.
world, we should give that person a lot of money. That is your position, not mine.
What do you say? Sorry, I didn't hear what you
I
said.
said in
I
your
just
in your philosophy. Oh, sorry, I was probably cutting out. I think in your philosophy, we should we should go to the guy in the Amazon, give him or her a big check, great education, everything, live in the same neighborhood as we do, because that will,
No, if that
increase
person
their.
wants to. If that person doesn't want to, it's free to stay in the Amazon. Again, that's the principle of freedom also. Autonomy. The person is allowed to do what the person wants. That's another
No, no,
principle.
no. But
Yeah.
no.
What do you mean, no,
Distributing
no, no?
things fairly has nothing to do with freedom.
Yes, it
Your
does.
your
But
position is
it's
we're
another.
gonna distribute things fair, right?
Yeah,
So
but
that's your
also
base position.
no, but also we're
Fair.
also freedom, fair and free, fair and free. Like it
Yeah,
goes
but
together.
again, okay. So if some of these people deny your money, then it's not fair. So how
No,
does
no,
that
no.
stack
That
up?
because that's their choice. That's their choice. Of course, if you deny it, I mean, anybody can deny it. Like in my system too, people could just throw the money away and go live in the forest, and they can do that. That's it's fair. They're
Right.
being given the money.
But
If they don't want
but
it,
okay,
if
yeah,
they
yeah,
don't
yeah.
want it,
But
then they
like I
can
said,
refuse it.
like it only works if you have that jealousy part, right? Because if your
Why?
neighbor
No.
has that house,
Why
no,
does
if
it?
your neighbor has that house,
Yeah.
you want to get that house, right? Not because you're getting closer to that to an overall average, which should increase or decrease the satisfaction suffering thing, but because your neighbor has a nice house
No,
and you
but
want one too, right?
no, because I
That's your relative.
no, because for me,
That's how you fill in the survey. That's how you fill in the survey. That's how these things work, right?
yeah, to a
How
large
do you
extent,
how do
to a
you
large
how
extent,
do you
yeah, that
measure something?
to a large extent,
You
yeah, but
measure
I
it
think
against
I
what you
think
know.
overall you can look at life satisfaction overall over time, and presumably, people are happier now than they were like 200 years ago because, now they just have better living conditions. So
But
like,
if you have more, you get more you probably get more jealous, or there's more
okay,
competitiveness,
you
and you get
you
more,
might,
so you
yeah,
have a
but
different outcome, and
you
that's
might, but
why
then
these
that's
surveys or these it doesn't
but
make
th
it's
that's
not
the
a good
problem of your mind. Of course, you should be
index.
able to find inner happiness as well. But the problem is that obviously if you've got difficult, harsh external conditions, it's going to be harder to find inner happiness. So the point is you should just be able to ensure that people have nice external conditions so that it's easier for them to realize that, of course, it's true. Happiness actually doesn't necessarily have to come from without. But to make them realize that, I think it helps to have more money because then you realize that money doesn't buy happiness. But you first need to get to a certain level of material wealth for everyone, and then, like, I'm middle class, right? So I could be jealous of rich people, but I'm not because I have enough. You see, so at this level of sort of wealth. I already have enough wealth nowadays in the middle class of a rich country to see that, then beyond that, more money does not bring more happiness, and so instead, you have to sort of look within to see how to become more happy from within. But most people are still too poor
Yeah,
to reach that stage.
but
Mhm,
again, those things you need to know or figure out how they stack against each other. Because I
mhm,
would agree with you that money or wealth is probably some sort of hyperbole, right? At one
mhm,
point, like you say,
mhm.
it doesn't really matter how much more you get.
Yeah,
The more money, the more problems, right? At one point, so it's probably a hyperbole. If you're very very poor, then it's a problem. If you're very very rich, well, it's probably also a problem, right? And
yeah.
if you're in
Well,
between, you're probably good.
mhm.
But we don't know how that stacks up against the issue of it, right? So maybe having all that money, you get a lot of other problems which
No, I
stack
mean,
up against
honestly,
that wealth.
I,
But
I, I
they're not
no,
part
you
of the
don't. You
survey
don't.
at
You
all.
don't get other problems, and they are part of the survey. Like literally, not your happiness survey, yes, but then there are other surveys where they literally just ask people like, how happy are you in life, and literally, see, new survey shows that more money buys more happiness, and like, the,
No, no.
they're and
Obviously
they're
they
and they're
say that,
acts.
but I'm saying to you that that's really the outcome of the method that's being used in these surveys.
No, 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 no.
Uh,
But I'm saying that this is
that will
different. You're
always lead
talking
to that
you're
outcome, of
talking
course,
about the
of course.
happiness
But
survey. Here I'm talking about they literally try to determine whether people are happier by not asking them about their finances. They're not saying like, are you rich? And then they're extrapolating from that to say that they're happy. No, they're saying like, are you happy? And then they also ask how much you earn. And then they see that there's a correlation between how happy they are and how much they earn. That is how they did it. Um, and
yeah,
so there, yeah,
I get that. I get
okay.
that. But that's the thing is that you're asking a question. It's like we're having this discussion now, right? You're asking a question about a person who has been thinking about the concept of happiness
Hmm.
all his or her life.
Hmm.
You're asking the same question to a person who's had much less time to think about this question. So
Mhm.
you're gonna get different outcomes. So I understand the whole happiness, income, and all that. The graphs you're. I get that, but the
Mhm.
method you're using always will get you that same result. But that's not really. You don't know how that stacks up. To
Mhm.
It's not like you're asking the same questions to people with a very different background or a very different, because it is the
Mhm.
thing is what I'm trying to say, I
Well,
guess, with
here's
a
something
lot
I
of
would say what
words,
you're saying.
is
Yeah.
that it is a money question. It is a
Mhm.
money question. It's much like that whole environment thing, right? At a certain, I think in the US, it's probably like, I think it's around $50,000
Mhm.
of income, right? If you have this given level of income, all of a sudden you start to care about the environment.
Mhm.
If you have much less, you have other problems you need to figure out in your life, and you
Mhm.
don't care about the environment at all. And if you have,
Mhm.
I don't know, $1 million dollar income, you care
Mhm.
maybe a general amount, or you kind of pressure to think about these things because you have a business or whatever. So the question that's being posed in these surveys is very much a question for people that already have money,
Mhm.
because people that don't, they don't really have had the same amount of time to think about this question. So
Mhm.
obviously they're gonna get a very different response. But you're asking a very diverse group of people
Mhm.
a question which should not be allowed to all of them, or at least if you pose it like that, you're gonna get the same outcome.
Mhm.
So that's very much a flaw in, I think, in that, because that's how these indices work,
Mhm.
in that method, right? So obviously the outcome doesn't surprise me, because the question you ask is very much leading to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but what I guess the only valid objection I'm getting here is that basically it's due to people's tendency to be jealous, and so like the people who are richer are going to be happier because they're like just because they're at the top of the pecking order. It's something like that. And I agree, and that's a problem. There shouldn't be that kind of jealousy. But if you're just then asking about things like happiness, then that is still valid. But obviously, I can see what you mean, because then if you made everybody rich, then everybody would just be sort of average happiness, and like the people who are now high happiness because they're rich would go lower because they're no longer above everybody else. So, and that's, I think that would be a fair point. And like here, I'm looking at this graph here, and they say that beyond a certain level, we can see that happiness does not increase in terms of after, in function of wealth. So, and this actually supports my idea of having a global basic income and an income cap, where income wouldn't be all that high, but it would be high enough for people to have a satisfactory life. And this is what
Yeah,
I,
okay,
you know.
okay, sure, but then again, like that's the well, the second point I was trying to make was that the type of question you ask is whether you get, obviously all these things are hyperboles, right? We know that. That's very basic about these things, but th- th- yeah, I'm trying to, how do I, I'm trying to figure out like the better way, because I know I'm posing this very fuzzy, so I apologize for that, but I'm trying to think of a way to describe it. Like, maybe I should say, like, I think the question about whether you're happy, or your happiness level about your life, that is very
Mhm.
much a question you can pose to average or over average income. I feel
No,
like,
but,
because
mhm,
think about it. If you would ask a question about crime,
mhm,
think about that. If you pose a question to the same group of people, or the 8 billion people on the planet,
mhm,
about crime,
mhm,
right?
yeah,
That's very much a different question, because the question is going to be the same for everyone.
mhm,
Do you see where I'm going with this? Context should definitely matter on the way you ask the question, or the gravity of the outcome of the result of that question, right? So if you pose a question
mhm,
to a group of people who had a lot of time to think about the question before you
yeah,
ask it, yeah, you're
yeah,
gonna get a different result if you compare that to a group of people that have not,
okay,
right? People that experience a lot of crime, they
yeah,
think about crime a lot,
yeah,
right? People that
yeah,
don't, they don't really think about crime, right? If
yeah,
you live in a secure neighborhood or
yeah,
whatever, and you never experience any crime, but you're getting asked about crime,
mhm,
yeah. But all these surveys and all these
mhm,
indices, all these numbers are being compared on the same scale, because all the demographics, it doesn't matter. You ask the
mhm,
same question to everybody, right? So
yeah,
this is a flaw in the method, is what I'm saying.
okay, I
Does
don't,
that make sense to you, or?
not really, I don't see why that's a flaw. Why? I still don't understand why. It's a flaw. You're saying that some people have thought about it more, so it's more likely to make them answer more negatively. Is that what you're saying?
Because it's very much you're asking a person to describe a feeling.
Hmm.
But if you think about a feeling for the first time,
Yeah.
the gravity or the magnitude of the feeling might be different
Yeah, of
if
course,
you
but it
think
might
about the
go.
same feeling
Yeah, but it
more
might be
often. So the
skewed
outcome of
positively or
your
negatively.
questionnaire, yes, we don't know that,
Yeah, we don't know
right?
that.
So the
Yeah.
but we are we, but we are
Hmm.
using the result of that same
Hmm.
question, which should be heavily matched against the
Hmm.
context of whether that person had any previous thought about
Yeah. Okay.
that question,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, I know
You're
I'm a
you're
bit fuzzy with this. Like,
you're basically what you're doing is you're presuming that people who are poorer spend more time thinking about the question, and so that is why it's not like properly adjusted, right? This is what you're saying.
oh, we know this. We know
That
this. Like, it's not a, we know this, right? So
well, yeah, obviously there's
yeah, so
will
we
be
need. Obviously, I don't have like a perfect way to fix it, but it's definitely a flaw, and that's why all these surveys or questionnaires, like you can ask them, but you already know the outcome with the method you're using, so it
Mhm.
doesn't really. It's kind of useless in that sense, right? Because yeah,
I think I think
if you think
richer
about that
people
question
they think about
a
their
lot,
life.
you're gonna
I think richer people think about their this kind of thing quite a bit too. In fact, probably less. You're probably right about that. But I mean, if we don't also presumably, even if you think about it a lot, you might actually end up thinking about it more positively too. Like it might end up being a positive result. But yeah, I agree that these questionnaires are obviously lots. They're flawed. They're inherently flawed. Obviously, because some people might, for the same degree of happiness, might still answer differently. I know. The point is we don't have anything better
yeah.
to measure than that. But I know these things
Well,
are
I
flawed.
think I think we do in a way that, like, it's not just about how many times a person has thought about the question, but also the I think that's the right word, like the gravity of it, if you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
if because the scale that the billionaire uses is
Hmm.
okay, and is a happiness level where the bandwidth of the billionaire
Hmm.
might be different. So you're placing that same question in a different scale, in a different
Hmm.
context, and the bandwidth of the person that's very, very poor could
Hmm.
mean, if I don't eat tomorrow, I could die, for example, right?
Hmm.
So that's
Yeah.
that's a very different bandwidth,
Yeah.
where I can get a disease and I can die from that,
Hmm.
right? But we're making an assumption or result from that, where we say, oh, okay, so wealth means you're being less happy because you worry about death. But
Yeah.
that's very incorrect logic, right?
Yeah, I see
Like, I
what you
know
mean.
I'm being fuzzy with the
No, but like
explanation, but
some of
it's
these
like,
questions
if
are
you don't take
literally,
the context into account, then yeah,
yeah, but literally some of these questions are just like, are you happy? Are you satisfied with your life? That kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah, of course, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so, but I agree. In any case, some people might just, some people that might just tend to verbalize things more negatively. And they say they aren't very happy when actually they're okay, and other people say they're happy when they're not that happy. And that's another problem with the questionnaire, and there could be intercultural differences due to this as well. Sure, sure,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. You, you
sure.
you don't know whether the person. Yeah, maybe it might be. If you're in a country with a lot of corruption, you might. Yeah, it might be beneficial to lie, right?
Well, no, but
So
even not counting lies, just some cultures have a tendency to like, hide their pain, and others to show it more, right?
sure. Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah,
and then they
for
might
sure.
also that might affect how they answer the questionnaire. Um, so yeah, of course, these questionnaires are very far from perfect. I mean, they are definitely flawed, but I think overall it's still I like to think there's some value to them. That's just sort of
The value
my
is always.
take
I
from
mean,
this. Yeah.
we know that, right? The value is always going to be the same. It's always, GDP or the income level. It's the biggest. It's the vastly biggest factor to it. And yeah,
Well, I mean,
I don't I
presumably,
don't really I don't really agree with that. So
but I don't.
um,
You don't agree, but like the whole point is like for the reason I would agree with it is because well, most people like they work because you earn money from working, and often like if you didn't earn money, they would quit their job, right? If you said like, okay, you got to work, but we're not paying you anything, well, you wouldn't do your job presumably, and so the idea is you're doing your job because you want a benefit from the money that it gives you, and so my whole point is that is implies that people's minds in people's minds, money equals happiness, right? Because if you do something, it's to have more well-being. Like you wouldn't do it for any other reason, right? If you want money, it's to have more well-being. And if you're working, it means that you want more money, which means that you want more well-being. So, and which means that money, it implies that money brings you more well-being. Uh, so also that, just from that logic, the fact that most people work
Yeah, but
is an indicator
that's
that.
a very macroeconomic perspective in a sense. Again, all these things are hyperboles mostly, right? So, and if that's the case, then we can't really. The thing is, like I said, all those things are hyperboles. But then if you look at the end result, or we look at the happiness index, we don't
Mhm,
see a hyperbole. You know what I
mhm,
mean?
yeah,
Because we always see that it's a linear
mhm,
uh, um, result where
mhm,
the richest countries are the most happiest and the poorest ones are at the bottom, right?
mhm,
So that's not a hyperbole.
mhm,
So that's the interesting thing. What I'm trying to say, like there is no, we know the method is very, very, very full. Yet
mhm.
we are somehow surprised by that the outcome is very much connected to wealth all the time, and that's the vastly bigger factor. Even when we know that that whole income thing is a hyperbole.
Yeah, no, I know, and I think it's possible to be happy while being poor, and there's, there's certainly value in cultivating that. But it's like it's obvious that in in developing poor countries nowadays, most people they have one goal and it's to be richer, right? And they have, that is their goal, and because they feel like they're suffering from their poverty, like literally, that is basically their their entire mindset, and it's precisely a mindset of scarcity that is born from the fact that they don't have enough money. And you could say the same for like millionaires who want to become billionaires, of course. But so I agree. It's important to make people understand that money is not everything, and that it's important to find satisfaction without money. But I think there's some basic things that people need to have. They need to have access to decent food, decent, housing, healthcare, that kind of thing. And then, well, I think it's also nice to, to be able to like travel to discover the world, to be, a few extra things that cost more money. And then beyond that, yeah, then beyond that, you don't need more. I agree. But the point is that if you're really poor, you don't have enough to eat. If you've got a really like small house and like dirty house, or, unsanitary conditions, then
Yeah,
have like
I
legitimate
really,
reasons
yeah,
for external suffering.
I know all these things in a way, if you look at it very, very briefly, they all make sense, right? It all seems to make, okay, of course, right?
Mhm,
If you think about it a little bit longer, like again, like we don't know how that stacks up, right? Because if you're
mhm,
very poor and you
mhm,
live in this house with a
mhm,
bad condition,
mhm,
yeah, you compare that house with a very bad condition to your
mhm.
neighbor.
Yeah.
Your neighbor might also, most likely, also has a house like that,
Mhm,
but maybe that house stands into a community which is a very strong, very secure, very safe
mhm,
community,
mhm,
and you feel welcome there. How does that stack up against living in a house where you pay no rent or whatever, is it's in bad
mhm,
condition,
mhm.
whatever? We don't know that.
We don't know
All we
exact
know is
point.
that income question, because we can measure that. So we look at
Mhm,
the part we can quantify, and
mhm.
then we say, okay, that's it. So that's it.
Yeah, no,
And
but
that's, yeah, I think it's very
point.
basic. That's very basic understanding of that, of the whole, of the bigger question where we started.
Okay, but yeah, but so wait, but what? Like literally, if you don't agree with this, you're basically advocating for. We're basically saying we might as well just keep people poor because they're actually just okay with being poor. And I disagree with that. I think we can say that certain amount of excess poverty is too much poverty, and that should be eliminated. Um, to me, I think we can at least say that. I think like literally it's like not controversial among hardly anyone. Like you seem to have actually a pretty unique take in seeming to think that it's
Oh, no,
okay
no, no,
to
no. Yeah, but it's more
um
of a matter in that sense. Like poverty, my position is that it is relative to what you know the most. So you would be looking at your neighbor. That's
yeah,
where
it's
that's your
largely
skill.
relative. I know
You
it's
see,
largely relative. It's
for us, yeah, of course, but for
not
us as
entirely.
Western, we have more information. So for us, the scale is global
Mhm.
because we know how much money
Yeah,
Jeff Bezos has.
yeah,
So we somehow for a small amount we take Jeff Bezos
mhm,
into account, and we think
yeah,
about this guy, and we think, okay, that's the top end.
yeah,
If you live in the Amazon and you don't know Jeff
yeah,
Bezos,
yeah.
you have a different scale.
Yeah, but the thing is that
So
I'm not unhappy because of Jeff Bezos, you see? Like I don't care. I don't give a shit about Jeff Bezos, honestly.
no,
Like
but you do though. You do though. That's the thing. because
No,
he
no,
decides also for you how you
uh,
feel, right? And that's the
no, not
interesting
really.
thing about the money perspective that you
This is
have. Oh, you do, because your
yeah, no,
scale is
partly.
money, and he decides your scale. That's the interesting
No,
part
but the
that
point
you
is that
keep
like
forgetting.
I don't feel I personally individually don't feel that jealous because I don't care so much about being super rich. I want to be moderately, well off, but beyond that, I literally, I mean,
Okay,
I
but
don't
how
need
do we
to have
decide moderately?
billions in shares.
Moderately, we also decide moderately to what is extreme, and we know what is extreme. At least we
Hmm.
know, the guy in the Amazon doesn't, right? So again, you have to look at others and their financial position,
Hmm.
everybody you know, and the more people you know,
Hmm.
the more difficult it becomes, right?
Hmm.
That's basically my position. So that jealousy factor, that's a big thing. Like if you don't know anyone, you
Hmm.
can be very, very happy. If you're alone on an island, you don't know what poor or rich looks like. That's
Hmm.
just you, right?
Yeah.
If you have a neighbor and this guy is better off,
Hmm.
yeah, you feel fucked,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, but for
Obviously, okay.
yeah,
So
I know, I agree.
that is your scale. So your scale matters, and you're
I
comparing a
agree.
guy who has no scale
I
to a
agree.
guy who has a big scale.
I agree.
Okay.
My point is that there's still some amount of absoluteness in there. And so I'm saying is that still, even people with no scale at all, they'll still be somewhat happier if they have more money. Even if they're just the only person on Earth, then they'll still be a bit happier. They'll be a bit progressively happier with more money. That
But
this
that's
is
such
my.
a that's a flaw in our thinking, because I know that's like the whole ideology that most people have in this
Mhm.
society, and they
Mhm.
think like that because
Mhm.
that is our context. But
Mhm.
we use our context of
Mhm.
that result that we get from using that context to a
Mhm.
person who does not have that context, and then
Mhm.
we make a conclusion based on the context that applies to us, but not to the person who lives in the Amazon, who has never heard of Jeff
Yeah,
Bezos, who
I
doesn't
know.
even know
I know. And some
what
people.
income is, who might not even have money, right?
I know.
So that is my issue with this.
I know. I know. My
And
point
I
is
obviously, like, I don't have a a better pragmatic solution like this very
my.
minute, because
I
I
guess
haven't thought about that. But
Well, it's also that money gives you it gives you more freedom. It gives you the freedom to choose whether you want to be poor or rich. Like literally, if you have money, you can choose to not use any of it and go live in the jungle. See, so that's also it gives you the option. So you actually this is also another argument in favor of having more money. Is if you have money, you can actually choose to be poor if you think that being poor is better. You can literally just choose, and so that's again, it gives you more options, and so now you can you've got more ways of being happy according to however it would make you individually happy. You can choose to be poor or middle income, or you can be rich if you are rich, right?
again, the thing is, okay, that I find that very interesting, because I agree with you there. You have
Hmm.
more freedom,
Hmm.
but the thing is that if we look at reality again,
Hmm.
that doesn't apply, right? Because how come that that people don't use that freedom
Hmm.
to go and live poor? Again, the same principle. It's the whole jealousy thing, where once you
I
get
don't
to the
think it's
higher
jealousy.
scale, your bandwidth, when you get to no, but okay, maybe a different word. Let's use the
Hmm.
word bandwidth, right? If
Yeah,
you move
yeah.
up that scale, your bandwidth becomes
Hmm.
wider and wider and wider,
Yeah,
and at that point, you can't unlearn the bandwidth. Once you've seen
yeah,
that, you
yeah.
can't really go back to the Amazon,
Yeah, but
right?
the reason for that, I think, is because it is actually better. It is moderately better, and that is why, um, and that is why it's like that. It's because it is somewhat better overall, and so once you know, then you can't go back, and that's the point. Is we want people to know. Like most poor people nowadays, they know, except for the few people uh, in the Amazon. Like most people, they know what it's like. They know this big bandwidth, right? They know that there are billionaires. Even the poor people in Africa now, they know that there are billionaires, right? And so they know the possibility, and because of that, I mean, the genie's out of the bottle unless you want people to be completely uneducated, uh, which to me makes no sense. I think we should strive to discover things and know more things and to be as knowledgeable as possible. And if we're more knowledgeable, well, we can also see that it's somewhat better to be richer. But of course, it doesn't have to be Jeff Bezos rich. It can just be sort of middle class in a rich country kind of rich. But that I think is enough maybe. But the point is that there still is a certain amount of well-being that comes from more. But obviously, you also have to. Yeah, there is. I agree. There is also a part that's just mental weakness, a mental, you know, a tendency to want always more. This tendency to permanent dissatisfaction, to always want more, no matter how much you have.
I
and
think
that and I agree.
that would
I agree.
probably come into your
I
satisfaction
agree. I
column,
agree.
right?
Yeah.
That
Uh, yeah.
that would be a part of satisfaction where you would probably say, and okay, if you, yeah, you can't, you know, you're if you're stuck in the context which
Mhm.
you've learned, and yeah, from
Yeah.
that, you know, it's very much suffering if you see other people being richer, right?
Yeah.
That is suffering. Like, let's be honest.
I agree. I agree.
You
But
don't want to
I
call
agree
it
with you.
jealousy, but
Well, there
it
is
is
jealousy.
suffering.
Well,
Like,
there is jealousy. There is jealousy, but
yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
of
just
course. Okay,
jealousy.
okay.
But there is a lot of jealousy. It's
Yeah,
just that
well, yeah,
there are other
it's more
things.
complex, of course.
I think.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess my point is that at this point we can't really go back. We can't really make people go back to being poor. And I think like literally there are obvious benefits from like proper you need to have a rich country just to have like proper healthcare, and to not just have people die from diseases. So I think that is like pretty important. Just have access to proper food. That is important. So just ensuring that kind of level of material well-being, I think that is really important. And then after that, yeah, then after that, um, then that you could make an argument that the rest is frivolous, and I kind of agree. And that is like I said, I advocate for like an income cap, which would be pretty low. It would just be like middle class in a rich country. That would be the maximum income for everyone, and nobody would earn more than that because I don't think you need to earn
But
more than that.
yeah, I hear that that's a lot of,
Mhm.
like, I think that's like a very popular thing in the US now, right? Like,
No, it's
what you
not.
hear about, like, well, maybe not popular, but I mean, like, it's
Income cap.
how
Nobody's
do you say
talking
that? Like,
hardly. What are you saying?
not at the level of politics that matter,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
like the youth or people that
Yeah.
will be, you know, out there in 20 years, right? So
Hmm.
I find that interesting because,
Hmm.
like, the whole concept, like, it doesn't really make much sense, right?
Hmm.
It doesn't
What?
really ties into like how real economics work, and we
Well,
know this already, right?
no, we don't.
So
It does work. I mean,
we already know the solution, how to, you know, how to get from a person that is poor to, you know, increasing their wealth, if that would be the
mhm.
goal, right? We already know how to do that, and we know, you know, a UBI isn't it, right?
No, it is it. It is it. Lots of people can't earn enough because they don't have proper job options, and people should have the freedom to not work if they don't want to. So, yeah.
Yeah, but
Um.
that's okay. So maybe this might surprise you, but
Mhm.
the thing is that there's overwhelming evidence that having a job gives you satisfaction. So you should be
Oh,
happy about
I
that.
I
So
completely
giving
disagree.
people a job
I
and a
completely
meaning
disagree
in
with that.
life, yeah,
No,
this
I
is
completely
economic
disagree.
literature all over the place. All right, this is just fact. Like, you can't really
No,
go out there and
yeah, it's
say,
fact. It's
you
fact
know,
in a society that doesn't have UBI. It's fact in a society when people who don't have jobs are poor and they're like stigmatized. Yeah, it's not fact in a society with UBI, and it's certainly not a justification for forcing people to work. You're like literally wanting
okay,
to force. That's like
let
enforced
me
jobism.
okay,
That's like ultra authoritarianism and authoritarian enforced jobism. I
let
that's
me
like.
let me rephrase it then, because
Mhm.
you're getting technical with it, right? I can get technical
Mhm.
too.
Mhm.
If you think about your life,
Mhm.
we know that having a goal
Yeah. Yeah, but it should be up to you. It shouldn't be
gives some sort
enforced.
of
It shouldn't be forced to you by society. It should be
sure,
up to you.
but nobody is telling you what. I'm not saying you, somebody or a government or whatever should tell you what job to do,
Yeah, but it's
right?
still
We
telling you
just
to
know
get a
that
job.
a
It's still telling you to get a job.
job, that's
Yeah,
a fact. We know that a job, whatever that is, whatever that pays, gives satisfactory feeling.
not to everyone. It gives maybe to a majority, and again, only in the
Okay,
context that
yeah,
doesn't have
okay. There's
UBI.
always,
Again, in the context that doesn't.
maybe
Yeah,
to some people. Okay, maybe
yeah. And
to
so
some
if
people.
so, the point is the UBI.
Uh,
Then people are free to have a job if they want. So then they can have that satisfaction. And then people who don't want to have a job, well, then they're free to not have a job,
Wondering,
and they have the satisfaction
yeah,
of
but
not having a job.
okay, but there's so many studies about this. Like, we already know that the people you describe,
Hmm.
you can't really, like, that's such a minority. It's
It's
just
not such a
a
majority. It's
basic
me. I
human.
don't want. I don't want a job. I don't want a job. I'm a doctor.
Okay, so
I'm
you're
a
part
doctor.
of
I
the
did 6 years
majority,
of fucking.
great.
I did 6 years of fucking medical school. I worked as a doctor. I worked my ass off. I hated it, and I'm much happier now not having a job.
Sure.
Um,
So maybe that's not your goal in life. Maybe it's
yeah,
something
it's not
else.
mine,
I don't care.
and the current system forces me. I was just constantly worried about like failing my exams because I would end up being destitute on the
Look,
street because I wouldn't have a job. So I forced myself, and it was grueling. It wasn't fun. I'd have much rather been on UBI, and instead I did this, and this was forced onto me by society. Um,
yeah, we know a lot about. Okay, obviously I can't speak from your personal
mhm,
position because that is your feeling, right?
mhm.
That is what it is.
Yeah,
But in
and
general sense, we can say that
and in
if
general sense, in a society where not having a job is stigmatized. Again, there's not it's not in the context when UBI has been implemented. There's also pretty much all markers of like well-being and also like economic markers of like societal well-being have increased. Like UBI obviously made people happier. Having UBI, it made people, they're less afraid of being fired. They're you
not
know
really
so
because yeah, no,
there are
come on,
huge
you're
arguments. No,
really no,
UBI
you're
raises
going off
UBI
the wagon
raises.
now.
No, okay, look, if you're being skeptical of UBI, that is ridiculous. UBI raises the wages of low-skilled jobs, like blue-collar jobs. It raises the wages because people are no longer desperate to have any kind of source of income. So as a result, employers have to raise the wages because otherwise people would say like, screw this, I won't do a job. UBI gives people the freedom to like be stay-at-home parents and not just have to work. You're talking about the 50s and how people were happier. Well, lots of the reason for that is because less people are working, because women weren't working, because they didn't have to work. And with UBI, it enables them precisely to not have to work. So if you want to have
Okay,
a society where they're like
sure.
stay-at-home parents, then you got to have UBI.
Sure, but you're
Um,
forgetting. You're forgetting. No, sure. Those things are all true, but you're forgetting the most important thing,
mhm.
and that is nobody's telling you what job to do or
It
how
doesn't
much
matter.
money you should
Doesn't
earn
matter.
from that.
Doesn't matter. And they're
All
not
my
letting you.
position. No, it does.
You're not
No,
getting
no.
to earn
Again, it
fairly.
does. Again,
You're not earning fairly.
no. It does matter.
It,
It does matter because having a goal in your life, something to do, versus nothing, is
yep.
a satisfactory benefit and might be one or two or three people, whatever, out of 8 billion that don't feel like that feel
Look,
like
I'm
sitting
sick of
around
this. I'm
doing
sick of this.
nothing is
Listen,
great.
this is
But
ridiculous. It's not that. And in any case, lots of people cannot find a job, and they're on the street, and you've got this a complicated benefit system where like it's a disincentive to work because then it's a disincentive to start a job because if you get the benefits, then you stop
sure,
getting the
sure.
benefits once you find a job.
Let me defend my position, right? As an I should note, as an economist, that should be important in this discussion. I would think so, right?
But you're an
The thing is
economist.
that what you're describing people on the street not having a job or not having enough money.
Yeah.
That's a problem, and I highly agree with you.
Okay.
But your solution, in an economic sense, is not going to get you there.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Okay,
It absolutely is. It's the obvious solution, and it's supported by plenty of
that's
economists.
the thing.
Um,
Is in an economy, it doesn't work like that.
it does work like that. It does work like that.
If you just provide liquidity without
Yeah.
productivity, in the end, that's not sustainable.
It is
That's what we know,
sustainable. It is
right? Yeah.
sustainable. You can.
How?
You
How? Because
How is it not sustainable?
you receive if you because okay, if you receive the UBI, and if a lot of people in society receive the UBI and they
Mhm,
don't do anything because they have the freedom to do so,
mhm.
no productivity
Yeah, of
will be
course.
out there.
Of
So it's
course.
not
Yeah,
it's not
I
sustainable.
know. The the
Where's
the
the
UBI
income coming from?
yeah, the
Where's it
U
coming from?
it comes through taxes. Comes through taxes. Of course. The UBI comes through taxes. You pay taxes to fund it. And then
Okay,
you just have
okay.
UBI low enough.
So more and more people are starting to pay, or less people are starting to pay more tax if more people decide to do nothing.
Yeah,
Well,
so the
and
UBI has to be
there
low
becomes
enough.
an
It has to be low
equilibrium.
enough.
There becomes
Yeah.
an equilibrium where at one point nobody works anymore. There's no
No, that is if
productivity.
your UBI is
There's
too
no
high.
production. There's no
Mm-mm,
income. Do you
mm-mm.
understand that? Like
That's not how it works.
economically, UBI it does. That's the
That
thing.
is if everybody earns the same.
That's how
You're
that's
talking
how
about
an
a system.
economic.
You're talking about a system where everybody earns the same. Like if a person who works earns the same as a person on UBI. That's not what I'm saying.
Not at
You
all. Not at all.
if
No,
the
I'm
UBI
talking
is
about
low.
reality. I'm talking about
reality is that
reality, right? This
UBI,
doesn't work.
no, it does work. Like UBI, if it's low enough, then enough people will keep on working because they want to earn more money.
We have different solutions for that, because I agree with your problem, but your solution is very extreme,
No, it's
right?
not very
You can think
extreme.
about something like a minimum wage.
No,
Like we know in a
no,
lot of country, a minimum wage works perfectly fine
no.
against the
UBI works
problem
better.
that you're describing.
UBI works much better,
No,
and
it doesn't work better because it hurts
UBI,
productivity, and in the end, it hurts the income of everybody. That's
yeah,
the mathematics of it.
but it doesn't
Okay,
hurt. It doesn't
and
hurt
I would.
productivity in all that much. It hurts it a bit, yes, undoubtedly,
Oh, okay,
undoubtedly.
okay.
We
Okay.
the
Explain to me then. Explain to me then how you will have at least a stable income if more and more people decide to do nothing,
You just said
right?
that
Because
you look.
you need to be
Explain to me.
taxing
You
the people that do work, right? And their tax will increase and increase. So their incentive
No,
to
it won't
work
increase.
will be
It
less
won't
and less
increase.
and less.
That won't increase all the time. It's a one-time increase. It's like basically it just increases until you've got the new equilibrium, right? You just have everybody. Remember,
And what
everybody
if
gets
that
the UBI.
and what if your possession if there's more and more people decide to do nothing? You have a problem then,
Then the UBI is too high,
right?
and you bring the
But you
UBI
don't have a
down.
solution
You
for
bring the
your
UBI down.
productivity.
You bring the UBI down until it's low enough that there are enough people that don't want to be on the UBI and that want to work. And you just said yourself that you think that most people want to work, which means that they will keep on working if
But
you
you
are
bring the
right.
UBI down. You're not gonna just bring the UBI down. We talked about the jealousy thing and the whole how that matters, right? That's in reality, economics don't work that way, okay?
What?
Because if we think about economics, we have to. Okay, you can do. Okay, let's start from the beginning. If we think about economics and how this works, we need to think about reality. It is going to be human beings in the end, how they
Mm-hmm.
act in a real economy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not really your solution works. Maybe in
No,
theory
it
you
does
can
work.
lower higher UBI. In reality, this is not how an actor or how an
You
individual or a consumer how he or she acts. We
no,
know this.
no, we don't know this. We don't know this. UBI is being
Yes,
seriously
we do.
considered by. Look, I'm sorry. I'm
How
sick of
did
this.
you
Goodbye.